You're listening to the Sugarcane podcast, where you get all of crypto's tastiest tidbits. Here's your hosts, Sheldon Trotman and Rudy Dogum.
Welcome to another week about crypto and blockchain.
Nice.
And this time we're talking about something that we need to do in this ecosystem in order to succeed, which is scale. Scalability is important. And Sheldon, how important is scalability?
Very. I mean, if we're trying to really scale this, it is 100%. If we're trying to scale this really to honestly the world, we need to start competing and getting to the place where the technology can be used like Visa or used like MasterCard, where there have tens of thousands of transactions per second globally. Right now, we can barely even scratch the surface of that. So scalability is huge for that.
That's really amazing about crypto, what was happening in like Bitcoin, Ethereum, pretty much all of them. As soon as they started to scale, a lot of issues started showing up. With Bitcoin, It was slow transactions. You can barely pay anybody because it was just so slow and unusable. With Ethereum, gas fees are remarkably high. You can spend hundreds of dollars to buy an NFT. It just was showing flaws in the current systems. When they first came out, it was, you can transfer $1,000 worth of Bitcoin for a couple pennies. Now it's a little more expensive. With Ethereum, same thing. So these issues are real issues. And I definitely want to know a little bit more about why is scalability so crucial?
Yes, so the reality is that the ways in which we do use blockchain right now is pretty specific to the particular chain, right? Like if you're transacting on, let's say, using Bitcoin, you're using pretty much the Bitcoin blockchain. And again, things are very slow there. And that's when people start transitioning to solutions like Lightning on Bitcoin specifically. And that's mainly for payments. But if you're talking about Ethereum, there's a bunch of different L2s or layer 2s, they call them, where people are starting to move their assets to and transact on, just because things are a lot faster there as well as a lot cheaper there. So that's kind of the ways in which both Ethereum and Bitcoin are kind of scaling. We can dive into that a bit more if you want to.
Yeah, for sure, because that's what we're using now for Bitcoin. Lightning is being developed. Ethereum is getting their layer 2s. And I definitely want to understand, what are the overview about these different solutions?
Yeah, so first I'll start with Bitcoin because it's the really simplest side of it. So Bitcoin, again, is pretty slow to transact on the main Bitcoin blockchain. But if you're doing payments on the Bitcoin blockchain, people typically use Lightning. So Lightning Network, kind of the way that works is that you open up what's called like a payment channel. And so let's say I want to transact with you. We kind of open up a payment channel on the Lightning Network. And that allows us to transact with each other pretty quickly because the actual settlement, the actual moving of the kind of, I send you $5 down to the Bitcoin blockchain doesn't happen instantaneously. So let's say we went to dinner and I paid the bill and now you.
Thank you.
I took you out.
Sheldon's taking you out.
So if the bill, let's say it was like $10, right? And you owe me $10, we'd open up a payment channel on the Bitcoin blockchain and you'd basically have $10 worth of Bitcoin on the Lightning Network and you can send that to me. And so I currently keep that in the Lightning Network, so it doesn't actually leave that. It doesn't go down to the Bitcoin blockchain. But I have essentially a payment receipt that you sent me that money, right? And so now let's say something happens and let's say I go out to dinner with another friend and let's say instead of me taking them out, they took me out. And so I still need to pay them, let's say $5. So out of the $10 that you sent me that's on the Lightning Network, I can take $5 from that and send that to that other person. So now essentially there's a payment channel between me and my other friend and me and you. So that's how we can transact. And if my friend wants to transact with you, the way that kind of works, it'd be that it'll use me as a hopping node. So if they sent, let's say $3 to you, they basically send $3 through me to you. So it kind of touch my node as it gets to you on Lightning specifically.
So that's kind of like those apps that are like an aggregator for all payments and kind of summing it all up and then distributing what's left over, kind of like Splitwise. If anyone's ever used Splitwise or an app like that, kind of you have
like Venmo
pool,
even.
Yeah, where you have a pool of all your friends who are making payments together, and then whatever is remaining is what's distributed again. That makes sense. And
Yep.
That's the DApp version of Splitwise.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's Lightning. That's how that works.
And then how does like layer 2s work?
Yeah. So now layer 2s. So kind of a bit of a context. So Lightning can only work for payments. You can only do that with like sending value, like money from one person to another. Now taking a step higher, a little more complex, are layer 2s on Ethereum. So Ethereum allows you to do any kind of general purpose computation. So like if I wanted to buy an NFT, for example, that's me sending money to a smart contract, the smart contract associating a certain like NFT to me, to my ownership. That's where you can do it on the Ethereum blockchain. And layer 2s are a way in which you can do that in a much more scalable, performant way. So like the way that technically works is that there's a set of smart contracts that live on Ethereum that kind of function as like the storage of what's happening in a separate location. So what I mean by that is like instead of, so I guess kind of talking more technically, if I want to interact with the Ethereum blockchain, I'd basically talk to an Ethereum node. But if I want to actually talk to a layer 2, instead of talking to an Ethereum node, I talk to a layer 2 like node, a computer there. And then that then talks to the Ethereum blockchain for me on my behalf. And so the reason why that works is because now instead of having everyone pay the kind of Ethereum cost to make a transaction on Ethereum, you talk to like kind of this separate party, a computer that then aggregates all the actions or all the activity in a certain period, and then aggregates that down and pushes that onto Ethereum, the main chain. So like it basically aggregates all the transactions and pays the cost of once for everyone. So now everyone gets basically like kind of a reduced cost for going to Ethereum.
Makes sense. And they're still using, like in both cases, they're still using the main blockchain, which is Ethereum or Bitcoin, as their consensus mechanism, as their final.
Yeah, what they call like the settlement layer, like the where all the base assets are settled.
Gotcha. And
yeah,
are we sacrificing anything in our blockchain technology with scaling?
Yeah. So the kind of caveat with the kind of Ethereum approach is that like instead of talking to Ethereum, where there's a bunch of different nodes across the world that all like kind of secure the Ethereum blockchain, in the kind of layer 2 context, you're talking to a smaller set of nodes or computers that then aggregate everything together and push it down to the Ethereum main chain. And so with that, you get a lot less kind of, I hesitate to say security, but like, I'll talk more about why I say that. But like, you talk to a specific set of computers that then are the ones that function to batch everything together and put them onto Ethereum. But there are cryptographic ways in which you as a user of a layer 2 can still, if the, let's say the layer 2 chooses not to, like censors your transaction or chooses not to include your transaction, you can still take your transaction from the layer 2 and push it onto layer 1, just because the main settlement still happens on the layer 1. And so like that's ways in which you can actually like still have the security of like you're not getting censored, because you just always have an exit to layer 1 if you want to pay the gas and want to actually get to layer 1 still. So that's kind of ways in which you can still get secure.
Yeah, and there's multiple, like there's a competition between layer 2s like Optimism, Arbitrum, and ZK is also in there too. So those are the top 3 that I know of. I think they're more trying to Starkware. I think they're more trying to come out. But what are the trade-offs between, I guess, the top contenders?
Yeah, so they kind of fall into like 2 main buckets if you're talking about Ethereum in terms of like rollups or layer 2s. One side of it, one flavor is called optimistic rollups, and so in that camp you find Optimism, which is a pretty big optimistic rollup, Arbitrum, which is another huge. The name is kind of funny. The Arbitrum is also another one. Coinbase recently launched their Base blockchain. That's also an optimistic flavored rollup, or layer 2, as people call it. And so those kind of one vertical, one kind of flavor of those. And the kind of trade-offs there is that I'm gonna get very, very technical real quick, and I'm gonna kind of work back up. So like the settlement period for in layer 2 on an optimistic flavored rollup is typically 7 days. And so what that means is that if you're interacting with anything on a layer 2 on an optimistic rollup, typically you have to wait 7 days for that kind of action to be kind of finalized, as they say. And there's a lot of like security guarantees that come into play when you talk about that 7-day waiting period, because if within that 7-day period, someone figures out that like something occurred on the layer 2 that's invalid or false, that shouldn't happen, they can then provide what's called a fault or fraud proof, basically to say that, hey, this action that occurred on the layer 2 shouldn't have happened. So like give a bit of context to that. It's like, let's say the computer that you're talking to on the layer 2 on the optimistic rollup, right? Let's say that computer decides to say, instead of you, Rudy, sending me $5, let's say you, Rudy, it says that you sent me $10, right? That's something that it could like kind of make up just because it's the one like producing the state and pushing it down to Ethereum. And what I could do is if I didn't agree with that, something I saw was invalid, I can say, hey, here's the state that I signed. Here's the thing that I wanted to happen. And here's the thing that actually occurred. I can basically submit that to Ethereum on the main chain. And then within that 7-day period, it gets reverted. So that thing that happened, that should not have happened, gets reverted. So like that's the way in which specifically optimistic rollups kind of protect themselves. They have a 7-day waiting period for anyone to kind of dispute the claim that occurred in that 7-day period.
So it's a 7-day like period of waiting, but you don't actually have to wait 7 days to receive your funds via Optimism, right? That's
correct. So if you're transacting with anyone within Optimism, an optimistic rollup, you get it instantaneously. So you have pretty much like a instantaneous. You can kind of take them as instantaneous actions. Gotcha. But if you're trying to go from Optimism down to Ethereum, like let's say there's some like smart contract network that has a kind of lending product on Optimism, and you want to take your assets from Optimism down to Ethereum and actually use it on another kind of product on Ethereum specifically. What will happen is that you kind of exit from the optimistic rollup. So you take your let's say you have 5 Ether on Optimism, you can send a transaction on Ethereum mainnet and get back your 5 Ether. But that kind of interaction, that'll take 7 days for it to be resolved.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of solutions out there that actually can reduce the time it takes to get that. So you don't actually have to wait that 7-day period. But again, kind of the optimistic flavor of rollups in that context.
That's pretty nifty. And it kind of does help the security side of things on the optimistic side. Yeah. And how about the Arbitrum side?
No, so Arbitrum is also an optimistic rollup, but like in the kind of ZK flavor of ZK. So like some pretty popular ones are like Starkware. So Starkware is a pretty popular ZK layer 2. They're technically not ZK EVM. That's the kind of technical nuance that I could dive into as well. But like there's Starkware. There is ZK Sync, which is a now up and coming ZK EVM. So that's another kind of ZK flavored rollup or layer 2. I kind of keep saying like rollup and layer 2 because they're kind of synonymous in a sense.
Yeah.
There's a bit of nuance and technical nuance people kind of dive into as like nerds, but like for all intents and purposes, they're pretty much the same.
Just gotta imagine someone rolling up all the transactions together and putting it into a block. That's literally what you have to think about. And it makes a lot more sense because it took me a while to figure that out. I'm like, oh yeah, you can roll it up. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, because like essentially everything that's happened on layer 2, you're rolling it up into one thing and pushing that down to the main chain. So those are a couple of ones. And kind of the technical details of how those work is that so ZK EVMs use what's called ZK proofs or zero knowledge proofs to basically take all the actions that occurred on that chain and kind of in the same way bundle them together and push that one kind of change down to the Ethereum blockchain. So Ethereum, again, is that kind of settlement layer. Here's where all the kind of final states live. But ZK layer 2s, they have a much stronger like cryptographic proof to now, instead of having to wait that 7-day period, you can actually take it as instantaneous. So like there's a lot of like, I could dive into technical details of it, but like for the most part, it's a lot of like moon math and crazy complex cryptography that allow you to take all the actions that occurred on a ZK EVM and bundle them together to make them on chain. Those are still very much in development mode, and they're still coming out. Like only within the past like couple months have like a lot of teams really went live with their alpha version of their ZK EVMs. So still very nascent field in that context.
And what's the meaning of zero knowledge in ZK?
Yeah, funny enough, so the ZK wording or ZK zero knowledge doesn't technically mean that there's like privacy. There's no like 100% like zero knowledge of the actions that are occurred. It's more a function of like how the cryptography is done. Again, we can dive into some technical details, but like there's a type of technology called ZK snarks and ZK Starks that allow you to kind of prove that all these actions that occurred are kind of cryptographically proven. They're cryptographically secure. So yeah, it's more like a nuance of the naming of it rather than it being like something like that.
Yeah, it's from what I read too, it's just mostly encrypting the transactions as they go along, just so it's not necessarily this address interacting with this person directly. It's more like this address is definitely done something with some amount of some money with something with maybe someone with this person over here. It's all good between these two people. What happened between these two people we don't know, but these two people are good. They're settled. Yeah, that's kind of like the idea.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You can actually like make proofs, like actual like mathematical proofs about things occurring without knowing what the actual inputs that function were. It's a very, again, complex moon math. I can dive into it, but for the sake of this explanation.
That's the fun part about all this stuff. It's like the amount of math that goes into cryptography and cryptocurrencies and blockchain is amazing. It's just amazing how we can even think of that type of stuff as humans. And it's also amazing the people who are working on making that as behind the screens as possible and behind the shades. It's like, okay, like I'm glad we have this tech, but I don't understand it, but I trust the people who are working on it. So great.
How do I think about this less?
It's tough. So then the last thing I want to know is like, how urgent is it that we find a solution for all these struggling layer 2s and scalability issues? Because we have good solutions now, but they're not perfect yet. And I guess, how urgent is it that we find like that perfect solution?
The urgency is much less of like a kind of existential threat type of thing, more like a like the space is halted until, right? And so what I mean by that is like the space can't scale to the tens of thousands of millions to hopefully like 8 billion people in the world without having highly performant systems that don't break down, that are very secure. And so like in order for us to get to the point where we can have like a Visa type experience on chain, you have to have like kind of a kind of cryptographically secure system that uses layer 2s and uses like other types of payment networks to reduce the time and cost.
Yeah, I'm pumped for that. We need it.
Yeah.
You can't stop thinking about once we were able to just use crypto and transactions and whatever else as much as we can on the blockchain as fast as we can. It's just an exciting time for me. And I've been waiting for it for over 10 years now. So any minute now, but
any minute.
You won't believe how far we've come already, people. It's been an amazing journey, and it's only getting better. But thank you again, Sheldon, because next week we got some more tasty tidbits.
The tastiest of tidbits.